Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Okay, very nice. So my name is Daniele Struppa. I'm the immediate past president of Chapman University, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you all to this inaugural event of this conference on Catholic theology and quantum mechanics, quantum physics. I'm very excited to have Chapman University, and in particular our Institute for Quantum Studies, who is represented here by our director, Andrew Jordan, which I saw a second ago. Here is Andrew, thank you, host this event that I hope will become a yearly event, and in fact a starting point for a much larger project on science and Catholic theology and their synergies, so to speak. We have organized this event in collaboration with the Magis Center, whose president, Father Robert Spitzer, is here with us, and he's going to speak in a few seconds. And Professor Vincenzo Tamma, he is there, who is the founding director of the Quantum Science and Technology Hub at Portsmouth University in the United Kingdom. He also is going to speak in a few minutes and introduce our speaker today. You don't know how many times I'm asked by colleagues, scientists, how could it be that a man of science and logic like me could actually believe the scriptures? In fact, sometimes the questions are not as nicely posed. People would say, I don't know, Daniele, you're such a smart guy. How can you believe all that stuff? So I would say that from my perspective, this conference and this project that we have really is the passion of hoping to see that one day people won't see anymore science and faith as contradicting each other, but in fact that I will appreciate the richness that each one brings to the other, and this in particular in the case of Catholic theology. Galileo, one of my countrymen from many years ago, used to say, or at least this is how he's quoted, that God wrote two books, one with words, the Bible, and one with numbers, the universe. And part of his job is so as bringing those two products of God together. And Kepler essentially expressed a very similar concept in the 1621 edition of Mysterius Cosmographicum. So this was after he had discovered the three laws that ruled the planetary movement. So it was a momentous event in the history of science. And he said, and I read this because I don't remember the words otherwise, he said, certainly God has a tongue, by meaning the Bible, that's how he speaks to us. But he also has a finger, the universe. And who denied that the tongue of God is adjusted both to his intention and on that account to the common tongue of man. And so in my mind, one of the purposes for this conference and for the project, the larger project we have in mind, is to continue working along the lines that this great man has indicated to us and bring together science and our love for God. And now it is my pleasure and great honor to introduce Father Robert Spitzer. Like me, Father Spitzer is a former university president of, in this case, Gonzaga University, and is currently the president of the Magis Center. Please welcome Father Spitzer at the podium. It is there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniele. Thank you so much, Daniele. Appreciate, too, your participation, all of our people here, speakers here, some of whom I think are still arriving in Orange County. I don't think there's a more needful time than today to have a dialogue between science, reason, and faith, a dialogue between science, philosophy, Catholic theology, because we are really getting to the point at which science is touching upon all of these metaphysical areas with all of their ethical implications. I mean, we've seen the hard problem of consciousness so well articulated by Dr. David Chalmers, who basically is saying that there are just certain things about the human spirit, certain things about human intellectual self-conscious capacity that simply cannot be reduced to physical processes and structures. You're left with the thought, well, maybe there's something transphysical in us, like a soul. Obviously, for people who are Catholics, that's a no-brainer, but for scientists to be coming up against this and to be thinking through this is really, it's a moment, a changing moment where we're arriving at a threshold. Similarly, the hard problem, not just of consciousness, but the hard problem of cosmology, where you have Stephen Hawking and Thomas Hertog coming out and going, well, you know, a multiverse may not be an explanation for the design that we have, say, implicit in the low entropy of our universe, because every multiverse may well require a beginning. Every multiverse that could possibly give rise to our universe may well have a beginning. And if, Hawking added, that is the case, it would have to have a very small number of bubble universes, which could hardly explain the low entropy of our universe. Again, we're at a threshold, something like a beginning, something even like an intelligence near the beginning. And then, of course, our conference concerning quantum theory and quantum science and all of the AI implications thereof. But again, what we see in quantum science is getting to the point where it's very difficult to reduce entanglement, quantum interpretation, superposition to merely physical processes and structures, certainly to, you know, the incapacity to explain them in a merely physical way, even using the terms of popular philosophy, a mind-like implication in all of these things. Well, there we are. We're seeming, like in science, to be touching the metaphysical, the spiritual, the transcendent. And certainly, too, we see the ethical implications of all of these things. I don't have to talk about quantum technology, implications for AI, implications, you know, for biophysics, for certainly gene therapy, gene technologies, all across the entire spectrum. There are so many ethical issues, and they do touch upon spirit in a human being, not just the body, but the spirit for sure. They touch upon, will AI ever become human? Can it ever become human if AI must be reducible to physical processes and structures? And humans are not. There's something about self-consciousness, as Chalmers would say, transcending that domain of physical processes and structures. How are we going to formulate an ethics then that does import into it the transcendental, the spiritual, even the metaphysical dimensions that science itself seems to be touching by way of negation, of via negativa, as it were, when it runs out of explanatory power from the world of physical processes and structures, physical universes, etc. We need clearly a dialogue, an interdisciplinary dialogue between science, philosophy, Catholic theology, and of course technology and its implications as well. So this is the time, I think, to start reflecting on what we can do to get that dialogue initiated. I think the organization here that, Vincenzo Tama, who will be speaking momentarily, that Dr. Daniele Stroop, a good, excellent mathematician himself, as well as the president, Dr. Andrew Jordan, who will be with us, the head of the Institute of Quantum Studies here at Chapman University. This is what we've been thinking about, and I just would like to say, any way in which you want to consider and reflect with us on this topic will be really important. We do need to get that dialogue going, and we do need an organization to promote it internationally, and as I said, as an interdisciplinary dialogue. I want to thank especially Dr. Vincenzo Tama. He has been truly the visionary and the force of nature and supernature that has really helped us get this vision off the ground. Want to thank Dr. Daniele Struppa, who's just been talking with you, for allowing Chapman to be a landing place, a founding place for this dialogue to be initiated and to continue. Want to thank Dr. Andrew Jordan, who really has, amidst all of his other responsibilities at IQS, has really been working hard to get this conference off the ground. And for all of our speakers who are here right now, those who are still arriving, to thank them so much for allowing this opportunity to happen, to have this initial dialogue, and hopefully to start an organization that will perpetuate it. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here, and thank you for your contributions in advance. God bless you.
So good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Vincenzo Tamma. I'm a professor at the University of Portsmouth. I have all the personal chair in physics and quantum technology, and also direct the Quantum Science and Technology Hub that is really an international effort that is based in our university. And I really wish to echo a little bit what has been said before. First of all, I need to really be thankful for the support that I had here at the University of Chapman, particularly the Institute of Quantum Study, from Andrew, the director of the Institute, Daniele, and also I knew I was in touch already with Father Spitzer before, and it really turned out when Andrew first invited me to discuss science that I realized that Father Spitzer Center was here, so we had a lot of discussion, and we start to discuss. I share this desire that I felt that we need of work at the interdisciplinary level in academia among scientists, philosophers, and theologians, which builds upon the understanding of this real interface that we have in the word of St. Augustine between the book of nature and the book of Revelation. So as was said before, there is no conflict between these two books. Actually, these two books, the book of nature that as physicists we study, is really much complementary in the understanding also of the book of Revelation. So they work together, and they are written by the same creator. So with this in mind, what we felt the need of is to bring together a community of philosophers, theologians, scientists, which generally do not speak too much with each other, but they can come together as a community with the same desire of search for truth, to search as truly the meaning of researcher is to search for something that is truthful, meaningful, deeper. And so what I wish, my best wish here is that this is, of course, is the opening talk for a 3-day conference where we will have top philosopher, scientists, and theologians that will share their top level research, but also will come together as a community to discuss these topics, and we hope that this can be the beginning of different programs, interdisciplinary, internationally, that can tackle the important questions that are at the interface between science, philosophy, and theology. And at the same time, because we, as academics, we have the responsibility to service the society. And so we, by doing our work and do the best we can, working together as a community with the same desire of search for truth as actually the Holy Family did in the very beginning. You know, that was this desire of really share in knowledge and to search for deeper meaning of things. So we hope that this can help also to inform the society and also the formation of young people, because we feel a responsibility also towards, particularly for the younger generation, where there is so much misunderstanding on this question at the interface between science and faith. So the idea is to bring together scientists, philosophers, innovators, entrepreneurs in these areas. And for this initial meeting, we will focus on quantum science and technology at the interface with philosophy and theology, which are expertise. Also, of course, I am a quantum scientist, so it was the natural thing to do. Andrew is also a quantum, so Daniel and so on. We want to, but of course, this is the beginning for a broader studies and broader interaction across the different sciences. And it's fitting that quantum science, being a foundational science that really explore the real structure, the more fundamental structure, the reality of the nature that we observe, phenomena that are very counterintuitive, that people have heard in the public opinion, like quantum superposition, correlation of particles instantaneously, no matter what is the distance, quantum interference. So these are phenomena that is puzzle the minds of scientists, but also at the same time have philosophical repercussions. And that's why it's very key, important that quantum sciences work with philosophers at the same time, but also with theologians. And so this is exciting time for us to have this, once in a time conference that tackles these topics at the same time. And at the same time, it gives us a perspective, not just on the foundational question, but also on application. So we work in our center in Portsmouth. We have a lot of application, quantum sensors, quantum computing, quantum simulators, and there is an interface between these applications that now are coming into the market, particularly on the quantum sensing side, and the philosophical question behind them. So this is what we will be able to tackle across. But the beginning now is really. We felt it was important to start with a public talk, because the main goal is really to disseminate knowledge to the public, to everyone, and that's our mission as academic, to make clear that actually science opens up to the meaningfulness of the question of God, and there is. And then this is why we have Professor Reverend Tanzella-Nitti here, that was very kind to come all the way from Rome. So that will so I will move with the introduction, the formal introduction for the public talk, without getting any time away from him. So I will. I want to make sure that I don't miss all the achievements that and the amazing curriculum of Professor Tanzella-Nitti, which is key. We need more and more people that work that are good scientists and also theologians at the same time. So Professor Tanzella-Nitti, born in 1955, took his university degree in astronomy at the University of Bologna, 1977. Italian CNRR fellow. He has been appointed astronomer of the Astronomical Observatory of Turin, ordained Catholic priest in 1987. He took his doctorate in dogmatic theology at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross in Rome in 1991. He has been full professor and currently serves as Emerito of Fundamental Theology at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross in Rome, where he explores the theology of revelation and the interface between Christian theology and contemporary culture. He is also an adjunct scholar of the Vatican Observatory and enough associate scholar. His theological vision emphasizes the unity of knowledge, the natural knowledge of God, and the humanistic dimension of scientific inquiry. All very key topics for our discussion also in the conference. Professor Tanzella-Nitti will give also a conference, an invited talk as introductory talk for tomorrow. His contribution includes writings on epistemology, the relationship between theology and science. So this is a question of epistemology, ontology, that, for example, in quantum mechanics are very key. And the development of fundamental theology in scientific context. He also leads a project on the theology of evangelization inspired by Veritatis Gaudium in collaboration with the Theological Faculty of Emilia-Romagna. He is author of about 20 books, including a fundamental theology in scientific context, a 4-volume treatise in Italian, which develops the whole program of fundamental theology, having on its background the result of contemporary scientific culture. A partial translation is in Scientific Perspective on Fundamental Theology, published in 2022. Tanzella-Nitti is the founder and former director of the DIST Research Center, Centro Documentazione Interdisciplinare di Scienza e Fede in Italian, and CISDRI, two institutions established in Rome and dedicated to foster interdisciplinary dialogue between science and faith. So Don Giuseppe has already done a lot of work, as you can see throughout this career in the things that I've been pointing out. And it also emphasizes how much important it is for all of this reality that has been already successful to work together. So we will have representative in our conference from different associations, the Society of Catholic Scientists, the Thomistic Institute, different institutes. We have, of course, our quantum centers and so on. So it's so exciting that we can all work together, start to work together. So through platforms such as the Interdisciplinary Encyclopedia of Religion and Science and this educational, he promotes theological interaction, philosophical reflections among scientists and educators. So with this, let's introduce and welcome Professor Reverend Tanzella-Nitti. We are looking forward for your conference, and I'm convinced will be inspiring for everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Vincenzo. Good afternoon to you all. I thank you very much because today is a Sunday afternoon, and you find the time to be here for listening to a lecture about the meaning of God in scientific culture. So I suppose you have a strong interest for this. It is a privilege for me to give this lecture in front of you. I'm very interested in this topic. I thank particularly the organizers of this international conference and of this opening lecture. As Vincenzo said, I formerly was involved in scientific research. Then I moved to theology. So I am in the situation of living in both terrain, in both worlds, the world of scientific research and also the world of theological reflection. And you know that scientists speak about God. The notion of God appears in some of the scientists' sentences. We have a number of examples here. Stephen Hawking, so long as the universe had a beginning, we could suppose it had a creator. But if the universe is really self-contained, having no boundary or edge, it would have neither beginning nor end. It would have what play, it would neither beginning nor end, it would simply be. What place then for a creator? if the universe is self-consistent, there is no reason to invoke a creation by God. Albert Einstein, I want to know how God created this world. I'm not interested in this or that phenomenon. I want to know his thoughts. The rest are details. The point is not to see if they use properly this notion or not. But I underline the fact that this notion appears in reflection of scientists. So our task today in this lecture is to see if this notion has a meaning or not in scientific culture. This is a path, a road that we are going to do together, and I have divided this road in 5 short chapters. The first chapter is some epistemological clarification. It is important to define well the terms we use. The second chapter is the opening to a meta-language beyond the formal language of scientific analysis. Is a scientific language complete? Is scientific language adequate for a comprehensive, all-encompassing knowledge? Or do we need something more to understand the whole of reality? The third step is the ontological incompleteness of a physical cosmos and its openness to a metaphysical ultimate ground of reality. Then the perception of an objective rational order in nature. And last chapter, the perception of the dialogical dimension of a physical reality. The question that we posed at the beginning, is the notion of God meaningful for the world of science? I suppose that a big part of people present here would answer, I would like to say yes, but I don't know if we can say yes. So ask your patience to do this road with me up to the end. Because just at the end, we're going to say if this notion is really meaningful, also for people who are trained, who are familiar to scientific culture. Let's begin by the first step, some epistemological clarifications. We have seen that the notion of God appears. What are the contexts in which this notion appears? In my opinion, there are 3 main contexts. These contexts are, first, the question about the origins. If you look at the title of Book of Popularization of Science, it's very frequent to see God, the origin of the universe. Is there a God? We don't need any God. So the problem of the origin, also the origin of the human being, the origin of life, no? So the notion of God normally in popularization of science is posed in the locus of the questions about the beginning. The second context is the inquiry about the source of the intelligibility of nature and information existing in nature. Why is nature intelligible? Is there an intelligence underlying nature? What is the origin of this intelligence? This is the second context in which the notion of God appears. And the third context is the debate about finalism. Is there any finality in nature? If there is any finality in nature, people think that possibly a God exists who drives cosmos up to its end. If there is no finalism, everything is just the result of chance, we have no God. Why does this notion appear? Normally, we do not expect this notion appearing in the words of scientists. Actually, the notion of a transcendent God cannot be object of the natural sciences, which investigate only quantitative aspect of the natural world. And God is not a quantitative element. Now, Questioning about the meaning of the notion of God in the context of scientific culture does not mean to demonstrate the existence of God starting from nature. This is not our task. The task of this lecture is not to demonstrate the existence of God starting from nature. It's different. We want to see, we want to ask whether a notion of God is meaningful also for a personal subject whose rationality, whose mind is shaped by contemporary scientific culture. And it deals with not only scientists, but everyone, because all of us are shaped by scientific culture. We use this kind of devices. We use many technological apparatus in our life, so we have a scientific mind in a sense. To let a theological or philosophical notion of God be recognized as meaningful in the context of scientific culture, we need three requirements. The first is that we ask scientific culture to remain open to a language and aspects of reality that transcend the scientific method. The second requirement is that the language and the aspects of reality transcending scientific method should be available for a discourse on God. And the third requirement is that a possible discourse on God must not contradict any scientific knowledge or conflict with the scientific analysis of nature. This is a very important requirement for people who work in science. Now, to judge whether a logos on God is meaningful or not also depends on the meaning we give to terms as existence, reality, rationality, matter. These are philosophical terms, and not everyone agree about the content we give to these terms. There are idealistic and a priori preconceptions that render a logos about God meaningless. For instance, if we say that all that exists must be the object of computational knowledge, if we have this philosophical presupposition, no discourse about God is possible. Also, if we think that the only truth we can ascertain is the logical truth, or the only possible conception of reason or rationality is that associated with the empirical sciences, or the source and rules of all knowledge are the mind categories of the knowing subject, or starting from sensible effects, it is impossible to infer causes that transcend empirical knowledge. If our philosophical worldview is this one, no philosophical discourse about God is possible. But, wait a moment. Are these requirements of science? Actually, not. These statements do not belong to scientific method. They belong to a priori particular philosophical stance. But we have to be aware of this in order to continue our path. Our language, including scientific one, is incomplete. Could we use this incompleteness to show what a meaningful meta-language lies outside the scientific method? The following four incompletenesses are worth considering. First one, logical incompleteness. Reality is more than language. But we have also an ontological completeness. We need that things exist before studying scientifically reality. Being is more than becoming. We have also a cognitive incompleteness. We need something to start with, information. But we also have an anthropology anthropological incompleteness, scientific activity needs, ends, meanings, passions, intellectual passions. Do these meanings and these intellectual passions belong to scientific method? Actually not. We need them to do science, but they do not belong to scientific method. So we are going to see this four incompleteness in order to look if whether in this incompleteness is possible to develop a meta-language upper to the language science, which is adequate to host a possible language on God. Each incompleteness indicates science's openness to knowledge and meaning that transcend it. Each of these openings are associated to four foundations of scientific activity. First foundation is a logical epistemological foundation. Then we have an ontological foundation. Then we have a rational foundation. And finally, we have also an anthropological foundation. We have four big grounds upon which we can build the building of science. The incompleteness of scientific language and activity, as well as the need to ground them, are findings inherent to scientific rationality. These findings point outside despite originating from within. So within the scientific method, we note this incompleteness, and the meta-language they point to lies beyond scientific method. I use the image of the window. In the house of science, there are four windows. The windows belong to the house, but let the scientists see the wide world outside. So these four incompletenesses, these four foundations, are four windows through which I can watch to the worldwide out of scientific method. Step number 2. The opening to a meta-language beyond the formal language of scientific analysis. Immanuel Kant's critical philosophy denies any access to the notion of God. If we had put to Kant the question of the title of the lecture, the answer, the reply of Kant would have been very clear. No, there is no meaning to the notion of God in scientific culture. To know belongs to the realm of pure reason, according to Kant. To think belongs to the realm of practical reason. The only one where a reference to God, moral values, makes sense. Within the realm of pure reason, which for Kant is the realm of mathematical and physical analysis, one cannot affirm or deny something that transcends the empirical level. Then, within the framework of scientific knowledge, the notion of God for Kant is meaningless. A discourse about God and moral principle remains incommunicable based on pure reason. It gains universal and objective value only within practical reason. But science deals with pure reason. So our question is a notion of God meaningful for the realm of pure reason? What happened 1.5 centuries later? Neopositivism, logical neopositivism, claims that the notion of God does not make sense in any context, even in practical reason. Its ontological reductionism asserts that there is no reality beyond the logical and empirical categories. Logical neopositivism's program was to build up an axiomatic complete language capable of expressing all reality through formal statements, linked in a non-ambiguous way to the world of facts. Logic was thought to have the property of a foundational theory. Mathematics was thought capable of a complete axiomatization. Finally, all the sciences depend on the language of maths. All knowledge could be reduced to the empirical knowledge of the natural sciences. However, history teaches us that the neo-positivism's program proved to be infeasible. It had to clash with the two serious limits. First limit, it is impossible to develop a logical mathematical axiomatic system capable of providing all the elements necessary for decision-making computation. This result was due to Kurt Gödel, but also to Alfred Tarski, and also to Alan Turing. In different contexts, they discovered the incompleteness of a logical, mathematical, axiomatical language. The second limit is that any system or language must be framed within a more general meta-language that supplies the meanings of the terms used within it. So we have a language. The meaning of the terms used in this language belong to a meta-language. Wittgenstein put in light that the meaning of reality lies outside the world of the facts. He was firmly involved in the foundation of a language capable of avoiding all ambiguities and nonsensical concepts. In the beginning, Wittgenstein belonged to the Vienna circles, together with the guys of the previous slide. He tried to establish rigorous connections between words and facts. Ultimately, he found that such a program was unable to deny the meaningfulness of notion belonging to a moral order. So according to Wittgenstein, notion belonging to a moral order continued to have a meaning. These are sentences extracted from his Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. We feel that even when all the possible scientific questions have been answered, the problem of life remains completely untouched. This is also our experience, right? The meaning of the world must be outside the world. There is indeed the inexpressible. This shows itself. It is the mystical. Not how the world is the mystical, but that it is. For Wittgenstein, lack words to express this. It calls it the mystical. Reality is more than our words. Semantic is more than syntax. You know that we have found an openness. We have broken the circle. There is possibility to look outside to the world of meaning. Third step, the ontological incompleteness of physical cosmos. We have different hierarchical levels of understanding. The first one, the most basic one, is the level of the natural sciences. They search for efficient causes, interactions, transformations, involving material and physical objects. But we have another level, upper level, which is the level of philosophy of nature, which provide the meanings for the down level. For instance, words such as energy, matter, form, truth, all the meaning of these words come from philosophy of nature, but they are used in the down level of physical analysis. Philosophy of nature searches for formal and final causes and studies material objects insofar as they are something. They have specific properties that scientific level receives. Do not pose, but receive from another level of knowledge. It also studies the philosophical substratum that causes things to behave according to their proper nature. A further level is the level of being, the level of ontology. Ontology concerns with material objects insofar as they are. Philosophy of nature, they are something. Ontology is even more basic. It studies objects insofar as they are. Theology of creation, another level, the uppermost level. Theology of creation concerns with the ultimate cause of being, or the ultimate origin of the world and the meaning it embodies. Concerning the transformation of one material entity into another, the natural sciences cannot explain the ultimate reason for the existence of material entities and their specific formal properties. Science is possible because of some philosophical presupposition. They are implicit, and normally in the work of scientists, they do not come in light, but scientists use them implicitly. They are at the basis of scientific analysis. Material entities must exist. This is a presupposition. This is an ontological presupposition. They must exist according to a specific nature. The physical universe includes a positive amount of information. Without information, we cannot do science. These philosophical presuppositions are external to scientific method. Nevertheless, they refer to concepts and notions that are meaningful to scientists. So we have seen that there are a kind of meta-language. There are concepts that turn out meaningful for the world of science, but they do not belong, strictly speaking, to scientific method. Let's do briefly two study cases. First study case, we look at cosmology. What if a physical cosmology rejects the philosophical and ontological presupposition that underlie its analysis? You speak with a cosmologist and say, well, do you accept presuppositions for your study? And he or she answers, no, there are no presuppositions. My science is complete. I do not need anything outside my science and the objects which belong to my science. What happens in case a cosmologist says this sentence? One ends by ascribing to matter the properties usually attributed to philosophical absolute. Eternity, to be the uncaused, all-powerful, necessary first cause, despite experiencing matter's contingency. So we end by attributing to matter, let me say, the same attributes of God. Also, one ends attributing to an immaterial mathematical formalism, for example, a model, theoretical model of universe, that describes a cosmological model, the power to explain the existence of the real cosmos. Also, one attempts to account for the existence and the beginning of time, forgetting that we are immersed in time and we are part of our cosmic history. And finally, one attempts to find a comprehensive law that serves as the foundation for whole of reality, theory of everything. So encountering the same incompletenesses and antinomies that arise in the realm of logic. So you can do a cosmology without any presupposition external to cosmology, but you end assuming this view, which is not very comfortable for people who do science. No? Study case 2. Does quantum mechanics discourage the search for an ontological ultimate ground beyond relationships and phenomena. If the ontological level is observed into the epistemological level, in other words, if a quantum physicist denies the existence of an ontological ground, the world is identified with the subject's mind. What I cannot calculate does not exist. Zero probability means not to exist. Things exist only to the extent that I describe them within my scientific theory. What does not interact has no properties. What is in relation, everything is in relation, is considered probabilistic and then lacking of any foundation whatsoever. What happens if you assume this philosophical view, which is a philosophical more than a scientific view? It happens that this view is insufficient because describing something does not create it. The unpredictability of what comes into being always depends on the entity's potential to be. Knowledge based only on observation requires philosophical and metaphysical presupposition to organize and understand what is observable. In Aristotle's term, something can be in act if previously it has been in potency. Now, let's see scientists' own words, which are more important than my words. James Clerk Maxwell, he wrote, "Science is incompetent to reason upon the creation of the matter itself out of nothing. We have reached the utmost limit of our thinking faculties when we have admitted that because matter cannot be eternal and self-existent, it must have been created. We have a kind of a wall. We cannot go beyond this wall. We need that something exists. We have to start with something existing. But the ultimate reason on why something exists or not, that does not belong to scientific method, according to Maxwell. It's only when we contemplate not matter in itself, but the form in which it actually exists, their properties, that our mind finds something on which it can lay hold. That matter as such should have a certain fundamental properties. That is, should exist in space, be capable of motion, its motion should be persistent, and so on. All these are truths which may, for anything we know, be of the kind which metaphysicians call necessary. We may use our knowledge of such truths for purposes or deduction, but we have no data for speculating as to their origin. Let's do a leap of 1.5 centuries. Let's go to a page of Paul Davies, astrophysicist, contemporary astrophysicist. He writes in a very nice book entitled The Mind of God. He writes, "However successful our scientific explanation may be, they always have a certain starting assumption built in. For example, an explanation of some phenomenon in terms of physics presupposes the validity of the laws of physics, which are taken as given. But one can ask where these laws come from in the first place. One could even question the origin of the logic upon which all scientific reasoning is founded. Sooner or later, we all have to accept something as given, whether it is God, or logic, or a set of laws, or some other foundation for existence." It's quite clear. To put this page in relation with what we have said in the beginning of our talk. Scientific activity then recognizes the openness of scientific analysis to a meta-language that transcends the formal language of the sciences and accounts for the meaning we ascribe. We have seen also that the openness to an ontological ultimate ground that provides the basis for all scientific analysis of reality. We need both. A way of speaking about God that starts from this opening does not result in a God seen as a temporary stopgap, but rather it points to the image of a permanent foundation. This is a very important point because at times people say, well, you have put in light that science is incomplete, and you have put God as a stopgap to complete what was incomplete. When I'm searching for a foundation, for the meaning of a meta-language, I'm not speaking of a stopgap. I'm speaking of something that is a permanent foundation of our reasoning. Through her research, the scientist recognizes the existence of a logos that endows natural reality with the characters of an objective rational otherness, something in front of me, logos ut ratio, and a dialogical otherness, logos ut verbum, something which is able to speak to me. And let's do the last two steps of our path, one dedicated to logos ut ratio as reason, and the other dedicated to logos ut verbum as a word. Scientists approach the notion of a transcendental logos in a somewhat implicit way when they wonder about the origin of rationality, rationality of cosmos, rationality of life. Think of the DNA, for instance, the intelligibility of the laws of nature, the origin of information. We can understand the physical universe in mathematical terms. Cosmic laws are effective over large-scale space and long-based time. The same elementary particles have identical properties all over the space-time. An electron here on the Earth has exactly the same properties, charge, mass, and so on, of an electron on the Andromeda galaxy. They are distant 2.5 million light years, but the two particles have exactly the same properties. The chemical physical properties of chemical elements follow ordered structures. Think to the table of chemical elements by Mendeleev. The enigma of intelligibility of nature has been pointed out by many scientists. Maxwell, Planck, de Broglie, Einstein, Paul Davies, John Barrow, recently by Roger Penrose. So, in the universe there is order, rationality. Where does rationality come from? Is there a logos beyond the cosmos? Order, rationality, and information make science possible. However, science seems unable to provide a comprehensive explanation of them. They are simply given. Speaking of order, rationality, and information is speaking of a ratio, logos, that transcends the physical reality, something beyond the physical cosmos. Speaking of the causes of order, rationality, and information exceeds the formal language of science, yet it is meaningful to the scientific world. These are concepts meaningful for the world of science, but they exceed the rational, the scientific method. Max Planck. What has led me to science and made me since youth enthusiastic for it is the not at all obvious fact that the laws of our thoughts coincide with the regularity of the flow of impressions which we receive from the extended world. That is therefore possible for man to reach conclusions through pure speculations about those regularities. Here it is of essential significance that the external world represents something independent of us, something absolute, which we confront, and the search for the laws valid for this absolute appeared to me the most beautiful scientific task in life. We need the patience to do science. This is a nice example of how a passionate scientist find in nature an object worth being studied. Freeman Dyson, the universe is an unexpectedly hospitable place for living creatures, so make their home in. Being a scientist trained in the habits of thought and language of the 20th century, rather than the 18th, I do not claim that the architecture of the universe proves the existence of God. I claim only that the architecture of the universe is consistent with the hypothesis that the mind plays an essential role in its functioning. There is a mind, but we want to see what mind is. What if this ratio were a computer behind the cosmos? Maybe. Could this ratio logos simply be a mind immanent in physical reality, identical to the cosmos itself? Very attractive. Many Eastern philosophies underscore this sentence, endorse this sentence. If it were the same as the cosmos, we know, such a mind would be contingent. The cosmos is not an absolute. It is subject to transformations, also to corruption. And then subject to transformation, just like the rest of the physical reality. Scientific method cannot determine by alone whether the source of rationality and information is an impersonal computer or a personal intentionality. This is my view. I think that starting from scientific method alone is impossible to deduce if the outer mind is an impersonal computer or a personal intentionality. We need something more scientific method. By relating what science says about rationality of the cosmos to other philosophical and existential insights, then we can infer that ratio logos, which explains the existence and rationality of the physical reality, must be other than the world and not the same as the world. But we need some existential reflection. We need something more than numbers and formulas. Last step. It's a beautiful mosaic from Monreale Cathedral in Sicily, Logos Creatore, the Logos Creator. The perception of the dialogical dimension of physical reality. Let's try to look into the eyes of this mind. Who is this mind? Who is the face of this mind? In their scientific work, researchers perceive reality as something objectively in front of them. They are surprised that they can dialogue with nature by asking questions and receiving answers. They recognize nature and its laws as a dialogical otherness. Werner Heisenberg. There's a very famous page of Werner Heisenberg in a dialogue with Wolfgang Pauli. wrote Heisenberg, can you or anyone else reach the central order of things or events whose existence seems beyond a doubt as directly as you can reach the soul of another human being? I am using the term soul quite deliberately, so as not to be misunderstood. If you would put the question like that, the answer is yes. In other words, Heisenberg was persuaded that reality in front of him was something, between inverted commas, personal, something I can dialogue with. By way of parenthesis, when I began to work as a scientist, as an astronomer, I had a senior scientist with me that told me, well, Giuseppe, when you plan an experiment, you put a question to nature, and nature answers you. But pay attention, you have to put the right answer. Because if you put an answer, the right question, when you plan an experiment, you built an experiment to put a question to the nature. Nature answers you, but you have to put the right question. Because if you put to nature, if you ask nature something that nature is incapable to answer, you waste money. Because each experiment costs much money, no? So be careful, putting only right questions to nature. This is Wolfgang Pauli and Werner Heisenberg, with also Enrico Fermi. In two essays, Physics and Philosophy and Across the Frontiers, Heisenberg himself reflects on the relationship between ancient Greek logos and modern physics. These are very, very nice essays in which Heisenberg speaks of the Greek logos. Max Planck describes the process of designing an experiment as a dialogue between the nature and the researcher. Experimenters are the shock troops of science. An experiment is a question which science poses to nature, and the measurement is the recording of nature's answer. But before an experiment can be performed, it must be planned. The question to nature must be formulated before being posed. This is the theory. Before the result of a measurement can be used, it must be interpreted. Nature's answer must be understood properly. These two tasks are those of theorists who find themselves becoming more and more dependent on the tools of abstract mathematics. The metaphor of nature as a book, we spoke before, has been used by ancient authors and modern scientists as well. This metaphor reflects the widely held belief that nature is the result of a word spoken by an author. These are examples of authors who use this metaphor. There are many, 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 many authors. Like a book, nature speaks. The metaphor points to the existence of an author. The words in a book convey a message and call for a response. Important. You cannot stay passive before nature. Nature prompts you to perform a response to reality. Let me say, to say yes to reality. By reading the book, one can learn something about the author, as happens in the reading of every book. These are just examples of the many quotes about the book of nature. You can read them while I stop a few seconds. Galileo, Boyle, and Francis Collins. they all speak of a language present in nature. Done? Okay. Scientists judge the natural world as worthy of study. Their intellectual work is motivated by a desire to understand the central order of things, by the same words of Heisenberg. While the beauty of nature and the quest for truth nourish all their efforts, scientific research is seen as a commitment to truth. Physical reality brings about meaning, conveys a message, and inspires respect, gratitude, and praise. This experience of awe and reverence, or experience of foundations, cannot be expressed by the formal language of science, though it is highly meaningful to those who work in science. We need it, but we cannot express it with a scientific language. The language capable of expressing such an experience is, in my opinion, adequate for a logos on God. The notion of God associated with this experience points to a mystery, at least with the case M, but also with the capital M, one that contains the ultimate foundation and meaning of the world. Let's go to our conclusions. Scientific knowledge is knowledge about reality. However, science does not encompass all that reality means and conveys. Scientific rationality is based on philosophical principles that transcend the scientific method while making it possible. Scientific rationality reveals openings that point to meanings and content that, though unable to be expressed in the formal language of science, are nonetheless significant to those working in science. The philosophical presuppositions of scientific analysis, as well as the meanings contained in and expressed by physical reality, make it possible to introduce a meaningful notion of logos outside the boundaries of the scientific method. We look at it through the window. Starting from this notion, philosophy and theology can develop a discourse on God that is also intelligible to scientific culture. Scientific culture in the sense that people who work in science, scientific culture not in an impersonal way of thinking, but it's concrete persons who labor, who work in science. The natural world continues to manifest itself as a mystery, prompting the question of whether the world has an ultimate explanation. Searching for such an explanation leads us to a meaningful domain of knowledge that justifies a discourse on God. I stop here, and I thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you, Professor Reverend Tanzella-Nitti. It's a wonderful conference. I forgot to say that you have been instrumental for me also throughout all the time. We've developed a great friendship throughout the year, and you have given a great contribution to my passion on this topic. So I want to thank you for that, and again for being here. So we open the time for questions.
I only ask you, please, I'm not native English, to put your question slowly. Thank you.
So we have microphones at the front if you want to come up, or I can bring this around as well. So we're open for questions and discussion. Okay, at the top. You have to speak up loudly because I can't bring up this up to you.
Okay.
Yes.
I have a question. My name is Renee, and I'm here on behalf of myself. Do I need to speak louder?
Yes.
My question has to do with many of the points you brought were very salient, and thank you, and wonderfully spoken and wonderfully done. My question has to do with what your opinion and how you across in your research and studies are your thoughts when it comes to the mind of someone who has suffered a trauma or a demented or may not be as high functioning as those discussed? And is there a role for God?
Thank you. You are opening the discourse on a topic that was not part of the lecture, but I try to offer some response. The problem of sorrow, the problem of evil, let me say, not the evil, the problem of sorrow, of human suffering, is a sacred problem, something in front of which we need to have much respect. So there is not a short answer to say, well, the role of God in a world in which there is a suffering is such and such. No. As far as we know, the answer that God, for people who believe in God, in the Christian God, offered to us was not a metaphysical solution, was not a scientific solution, was an existential event, the event of the cross. Jesus on the cross says, I assume suffering upon my shoulders. I do not explain to you why suffering exists, but I tell you that you are not alone, that I suffer with you. And I think that this is the answer that we can provide. Suffering has a role in God's providence, but I think that we're not able to look precisely what this role is in this life. We will see it in the other life. This is my view.
Take this out for you. Speed it low, actually. So, well, thank you very much for your talk, Father. It kind of reminded me of, there's a quote from Robert Jastrow, where he said that, for the scientist who have lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. Because he has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak as he pulls himself over the final rock. He is greeted by a band of theologians who've been sitting there for centuries. And it kind of reminds me of like all this, like the new language or a meta language. It reminds me of the kind of the Aristotelian categories. But it seems like there seems to be like a resistance on kind of coming back to, I guess, it's 2,300 years of wisdom of the categories, and trying, instead of building upon that, which is St. Thomas Aquinas and the scholastics have done. But why does it seem there is like an effort of trying to build upon the Enlightenment foundations versus just recalling the ancient wisdom that seems to be working and actually has a better way to categorize or capture the knowledge that we've been seeing in the universe? So what would you say? Like, why there seems to be that resistance? I don't know if my perception is false, or is there really a culture of like, no, Aristotle, no, enlightenment, yes?
Ho capito la citazione di Jaustro e poi dopo. Okay. I know the quote of Jastrow is very, very, very nice. Also because the image of a mountain, in my opinion, is a good image because you can climb the mountain by many paths, many different paths. No, you have the path of scientific method, you have the path of philosophy, you have the path of existential. One of these paths are the classical metaphysics. So you mentioned the Aristotelian view of nature. Of course, Aristotelian view must be updated, but it is a philosophical view. There is an error, in my opinion, when people say Aristotelian physics is no longer valid. But Aristotle never did the physics, because what he calls physics is a philosophy of nature. It's a philosophy of nature. So, in my opinion, a relevant number of statements of Aristotle in philosophy of nature are still valid, but we need a translation. Because if you put these statements today in front of contemporary scientists, they say, well, this is not so important for me. No, I'm interested in other things. So we need people with both expertise in philosophy of nature and in natural sciences. And they can provide this translation. I think that Thomas Aquinas, which does not repeat Aristotle's, but read Aristotle's in the light of a principle of creation. Aristotelic and Thomistic view of nature is still valid in many things, but we cannot use things straightforwardly. We need people able to translate it for contemporary times.
Another question over here.
Hi, thank you for the talk. So my name's Ivan. I teach astronomy around here at local community colleges, and I had a question. I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on René Descartes' argument, for the ontological existence of God, and how he associates that, the existence of God with geometric perfection in a triangle, and then our best physical models of describing nature, so quantum mechanics and the Hilbert space that describe it, or the pseudo-Riemannian manifolds that describe general relativity. What are your thoughts on associating, God's existence with geometry?
Along the history, many people tried to demonstrate the existence of God, starting from many terrains, geometry, biology, and so on. In my opinion, we have to clarify beforehand which image of God are we speaking about. Because God is a common name, it's not a personal name. So there are many paths to God, but we have to clarify before which God are we speaking about. So if by God we mean if by God we mean a foundation for geometry, perhaps starting from geometry, you can reach a foundation for geometry. This is our God. Biologists say, well, I can demonstrate God looking at the beauty of nature. So for you, God is the author of beauty. The personal God of Judeo-Christian tradition is something more, much more. All these paths are useful, but they are not absolute paths to God. We need them because they are ways of seeing how to approach God, but the personal God is attainable only by revelation. This is my view.
Can I hear? Okay, thank you for the nice talk. Well, I think it's clear from your talk and also from other considerations that science, and modern science in particular, points towards the existence of God. At least it suggests it's strong in that, for the reasons that you have been explaining. Now, that is good news for some people. I will include myself in that group, but it seems to be bad news for other people. And to avoid that concept, then they invent things like the multiverse, or to explain the fine-tuning, or I don't know, the many worlds, or they insist in the existence of hidden variables to explain, to defend that nature is deterministic and so on. So I think that some people certainly are very resistant, very resilient to the concept of God. And then my question would be, why do you think there are some people for which for them is not a good news? I mean, you could say that I should ask them, but I would like to know your opinion.
Spiegare un po' meglio perché non ho capito. No, in italiano, per favore. Okay. Well, if I understood well, if there are people who a priori are not interested in the notion of God, the idea of God, we have to help these people to put the ultimate questions on their life. What is the meaning of my life? Why I exist in this very moment, in this nation, in this town, in this moment of history? Is there something behind my life? Is my I an I in front of a you? I suppose that all human beings, in some specific moment of their life, they pose ultimate questions on the meaning of their life, on the meaning of sorrow, the meaning of love. So my idea is just to patiently accompany everyone up to the moment in which the question is put. And then when the question arises, help them to know that there are some answers offered historically to this question. Not only from the Judeo-Christian revelation, but also from other kind of revelation that we have. And don't forget that we have a natural revelation. The world is a word of God, this revelation. So everyone is able to listen to nature, to look at the starry sky and say, why I am here. What is this beautiful starry sky above? So when the question about ultimate meaning of life arises, if there is a believer near to that person, he can help him or her to address this question in the right way.
We have time for 2 questions more. Yes.
I'll try to make mine brief. Hi, my name is Zara. Thank you so much. That was a beautiful talk. I'm from India, and so I've lived here for many years, but I come from an Eastern perspective, I think, on a lot of the conversation around the foundation. And you touched on it a little bit in your talk, and I never heard anybody talk about it in terms of the impersonal like a computer of the cosmos versus the personal, having thoughts, an author. And I was wondering, in kind of your study and in this forum of having all these different voices come in and these different approaches to science and theology, if there is space for that Eastern perspective on the same subject of what we don't understand, or the mystery, capital M, and whether, or if you have any thoughts on the approach of Catholicism to answer those questions versus the Eastern philosophies. What is your preference? Why do you choose Catholicism over anything else?
Questa è la tua prospettiva solo che non risulta per la tua domanda ha detto come il cattolicesimo, a differenza delle filosofie orientali, può rispondere.
Okay. There is much wisdom in the Eastern philosophies. I see them as a preparation for revelation. So it's very important to defend, to hold the capacity of many cultural traditions in the Eastern world to do silence in themselves. Because we in the Western world, we have much difficulty to stop, to rest, to listen to. No? But we cannot confine ourselves in doing silence. We need to listen to a word. I suggest that this word exists. There are two words mainly. The word of our conscience, and we realize that it is different from us. It is a different word. And the word comes from nature, from the universe. And then the word of God written in the sacred text. But when we speak of sacred text, we begin to have differences between different religions. But these first two words, conscience and nature, are the same for everyone. And they are other than myself. Think that many people along history were able to offer their life and to die to be coherent with his conscience, his or her conscience. This is a very strong argument. Because I know that there is a word that says to me to do this. And also the word coming from nature, from the universe, is a very strong word. There is a passage by St. Augustine, more or less he says, when all the other words are silent, at least the words of nature are clear, and so you can listen to them. Okay.
It was a wonderful lecture. Where can we read this? Do you have a book? Do you have a publication where we can study this that you have presented to us?
I thank you for this interest in my writings. I have a personal web page. You digit my name. In a personal web page, there is a menu, publications. A number of them are in English, other in Italian. You look at the titles. If there is any title of interest for you, you can download. If they are articles, you can download freely. If they are books, you have to buy the book. Thank you for your interest. Okay.
Can you reach out, can you touch on the issues that we're seeing from the medical perspective on near-death experiences that are happening around in the medical profession, and how to explain this, and what are the consequences, or maybe deeper thought on this one?
Okay. Well, my view was the view of scientific method of people who work in physics, mathematics, natural sciences. Paths to God starting from the medical profession, there are many, many, many. And also room for a discourse on God in the medical profession, there is much room. The meaning of life, the meaning of human sufferance, the meaning of taking care of the other. What is the ultimate reason why I have to take care of the other? Just an horizontal solidarity, or we have to respond to someone with capital S who is above us, no? So every human activity has room for discourse on God. Everyone has to go more in depth and realize what are the paths toward God starting from his work, his or her work.
Okay, I am going to walk on. You shout it out in your head. Go ahead.
Last question.
Last question. Okay, we make an exception. He's my co-director. He's allowed to ask a question.
So this microphone.
Yeah, it works.
I have a very loud voice anyway. So thank you. Thank you very much for your talk. I really enjoyed it very much. So even last week, Vincenzo and I, we had a conversation of a couple of hours in Costa Rica. I say as a scientist, I learned that when I started, they say to us to don't ask the question of why. Why is coming from the philosophical perspective. As a physicist, you should always ask how. And when you ask how, of course, you try to describe the phenomena, writing the mathematical formulations, understanding, predicting, and then even using it for the future. Well, those scientists that you address them, and you have named them, and they had examples, they are great philosophers as well. So that was the reason they were thinking about also the why question. And they had their own perspective after being on the pile of, knowledge at that time. One thing that I'm really, really afraid is that someone has to really reach to that level to have such certain thoughts to share. Else, what will happen is that a mathematical question will be answered, a field will be opened up, and based on the Karl Popper, let's say, verifying the theory, we may verify them for a while, and after that, you falsify and the theory will be gone. And we are using this theory to answer some of those fundamental questions, and mixing this and bringing it to the way that we can describe what are the existence, it will be a little bit fragile and will be questionable. So what do you think of that? I mean, is it really necessary to always looking up at the new theories and also describing the existence of the nature and the existence of the thought and consciousness, as you say? Or no, we have to not mix them the two together, but you can use the elements to describe the nature.
Okay. Just a couple of perspectives. First perspective, I agree that we cannot separate the how and the whys. So I'm not a friend of the separation that science is concerned with hows and philosophy, theology is concerned with whys, because science is concerned with whys. To do science, we need why. But we have different level of whys. We have ultimate whys and intermediate whys. If you go to the very ultimate whys, why the world exists, why I myself exist, these kind of whys are, they correspond to the personal intentionality of a creator. But all the other whys are whys at the level of a physical analysis. Aristotle said that scientia est scire per causas. So if we look for causes, we put whys. Concerning the idea that all our knowledge is falsifiable, we have to interpret Popper, because there are many interpreters of Popper. In my opinion, the view of Popper is not that every representation of the world is absolutely equivalent. We can choose one or the other. No, there is a basic knowledge that we integrate epoch after epoch. But this knowledge is real. Also, the idea that something is falsifiable is falsified, the very reason this is that I have to adhere of a reality. So I change a theory because my theory is no longer adequate to interpret reality. So also in Popper there is an idea that we have a growing knowledge, and this knowledge is meaningful for us. Perhaps not the same Thomas Kuhn, For Thomas Kuhn, all the representations are equivalent. I don't endorse this view, because according to this view, there is no progress. And we go to the moon, we perhaps are going on Mars. This is progress. Okay.
So unfortunately, we need to wrap up with questions. I wish to thank again Professor Tanzella-Nitti for the wonderful conference, for all of you here to be present. Just before you leave, just a few remarks. So here was your bibliography. And so this, just for who is interested to come, there is a mass celebrated by Father Spitzer at 5 p.m. This is just for who wish to be there. And these are, you can find the direction from here to the Fish Interfaith Chapel, where the Mass, the Holy Mass, the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass will be celebrated. And as last thing, if as I spoke at length in the beginning about this initiative that start here with this inaugural event, and if you are interested and like to support the mission and this new effort, here you can find a contact email, and please feel free to email us. And again, thank you so much for being here, and just the fact that you are here is a sign that you are interested in searching for truth, for deeper question in science, philosophy, and theology, and hope we can have more of these events, and let's keep in touch. Thank you so much for being here.